So now we enter into the late Byzantine. Now, at this point, we're really looking at the Byzantine Empire sort of at the end. It's coughing up blood, but it's not quite dead yet. See, what happens is in 1204, the Fourth Crusade will actually sack Constantinople, and for the next 250 years until 1453, the Byzantine Empire is really a shadow of itself. It barely extends beyond Constantinople itself. In 1453, we will see an invasion by the Muslim armies that will successfully take Constantinople, change it into Istanbul, and we will see the demise of the Byzantine Empire. So we're really at the end here. And one other thing that happens a little bit before this is the Orthodox Church of the East will break from the Church of Rome. And this will cut off a lot of power for the Byzantine because suddenly the people to the west of them no longer rely on them. They're trying to find ways around the Byzantine. So that will take away a lot of power from the Byzantine Empire as well. So we move on to the Anastasis. And this is from the Church of Christ in Kora. And what we're seeing here is actually a fresco. We're no longer working with mosaic. Frescoes, of course, being much easier to do than mosaic. Whereas a mosaic might take months or years, a fresco can be done in a few days to a few weeks, depending on their size. And this is in a funerary side chapel off the main church. So what we're starting to see is these side chapels in churches, which would be sponsored by a family. It becomes a family chapel, effectively. And what we're seeing is a new fascination with death and the afterlife. This is not surprising given the events of 1204, the sack of Constantinople, the loss of the heart and soul of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople is still there, but it's definitely not very powerful. People at this time are focusing on talking about how things used to be. And the subject here focuses on the end of days. What we have in the center is this is actually Jesus raising the dead. We're not at the point yet where Jesus is judging the dead. This is simply raising the dead for judgment. And what we see on either side, we have, saints on one side, secular peoples on the other, maybe a few secular people back here. People being raised from the grave. This is, of course, a very hopeful image. Imagine sitting there at a funeral and you look up and you see this and you go, yeah, my uncle, cousin, nephew, whomever will rise up again one day. I will see them again. And that's literally what we're seeing. We're also seeing a separation. Here we have the spirit being separated from the chattel, the property, the stuff of everyday life. We have keys and locks and bits of metal and doors and everything else, and a slave. Wait, what? We have a slave. Now, in the ancient world, slaves were property, but not really in the same sense that we see in the American South. Some of those ideas are changing in the Byzantine Empire and parts of the Byzantine Empire. And slaves, especially slaves who are not Christian, would be seen as property, as nothing more than another thing that you have as a materialistic possession. And therefore, the slave, you'll notice, isn't being saved. He's thrown away with the refuse of the rest of life while the spirit continues on. And it makes for a very interesting sort of study in the sociology of the time. Jesus is in white, surrounded by the mandorla, that body halo. And then he has a halo around his head as well. This is a very unusual image to find in a church at the time, because this isn't a pankarator or a theotokos. This is much more a narrative, but it's a key narrative, especially when you keep in mind that this is a funerary chapel, and given the events of the Byzantine Empire during this period. People are looking forward to ending the suffering in this life and passing on to the paradise in the next.